come before you in the name of Christ, who was, who is, and who is to come. Amen. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus said, I am the way. Before Jesus, the Israelites were sometimes known as the people of the book that contained the story of God's salvation, His saving grace, the magnificent deeds that He had done to release them from earthly situations. We're good at getting ourselves in earthly situations. Jesus said, I am the way. And after Jesus was crucified, and after Jesus was resurrected, those who aimed to follow Him, to model their very living after the way Jesus lived, were known as people of the way. It wasn't until much later that we took on different names like Christian. People of the way. Jesus has this spectacular way of shifting, changing, evolving our perspective too. Not just of ourselves, this sense of we're people of the book, we're people of the law, and now we're people of the way. But He broadens our understanding in some ways and pulls it in close in others to understand what the law is really about for us. And we have this fantastic story in Acts, one that's etched in my mind because in Sunday school as a child, we watched this really odd movie about Paul being blinded on the way. So for decades even, I thought that Paul fell off of his horse. It doesn't say that in Acts, though, does it? It just says that he was he was blinded while he was on this way. But of course he fell off a horse. It happened in the movie. It wasn't until I said something about it in a sermon, said, there's nothing in that passage about a horse, and I thought, darn it, you're right. So we all do this from time to time. We get an idea in our head that things are a certain way because of whatever reason. It might be a silly TV movie. We get things in our mind. We get fixated on them and have a hard time changing our perspective. Jesus is the way. Jesus is here to help shift our perspective. I don't know, but I have to wonder a little bit with Saul in particular. Now, the thing about Saul is the same before and after this experience, because the way that Saul is the same even after he becomes Paul is that he loves God extraordinarily from beginning to end. That does not change. How he lives into this love for God changes quite a bit, though, doesn't it? Yeah. So what happens with Saul loves God so vehemently that he will set out to destroy those who are going against his very notion of God, breathing threats and murders because he's pretty sure up until that point that that's what God wants him to do. I have to wonder, I do wonder, if God was more interested in stopping the threats and murders of Saul, or if he was more interested in winning the heart of the man who becomes Paul. Of course, I don't have to wonder for very long because I believe in a God of love. I believe that Jesus is the way. And even as Saul set out to persecute those to stop those through threats, through murder, hauling them all in, making sure they can't proclaim this way of Jesus, his whole perspective is shifted. He's blinded, incapacitated, unable to do the thing that he feels called by God to do. Now, I think sometimes we lose the subtlety of the significance of his blinding, because we might get hung up on the thought of like how awful it would be to be blind. We can imagine and place ourselves in Saul's shoes and think about what it would be like to be without our sight. But we don't have the contextual understanding of what this physical malady would have been to a Jew. It would have been, at this point in particular, an indication of sinfulness, that he would be blind, physically incapacitated. Later, Paul says, under the law, blameless, right? So we know Paul's perception of himself. Just want to keep an eye on it. He knew how to follow the law, but he needed to learn to follow the way. The law is tidy. Yes, no, right, wrong, up, down. The way is difficult. The way is challenging. The way, in order to follow the way, we need to embrace the perspective of Jesus. Instead of thinking of those in need as a burden, we need to see them as beloved creatures of God. Instead of thinking of the hardship first, of reaching out in love, we have to think of the joy that the others will experience. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And he bids us, follow me.